So in this section, we're going to be setting up our initializing, or we're going to be initializing our persistent storage, but it's really setting up our persistent storage. If you remember in the theory section, persistent storage is like a database of trees and where they're located versus rules, which is, hey, let's plant based on, I have these defined set rules, plant, in these areas. Persistent storage is going to be really good for exact planting. You need it in a tree in an exact spot. And it's going to be like a database of the types of trees, the size, and where that tree is located. So in order to do that, you can imagine that we need to kind of initialize or create this persistent storage database. So let's go into VSPro, and let me get rid of this one so you guys can see it's left over from my experimentation setting up for this. We're going to go into Vegetation Studio Pro, and you'll see if we scroll down, you've got this section called Persistent Vegetation Storage, and this is really the area that we're going to be dealing with. But in here, under like, if we click on some of these tabs, we get this error that says you need to add a persistent vegetation package to the component. Well, that's because we do not have that database that we need for storing the information, that persistent storage. So we need to create it. So back in our biome and mass folder over here, where we created our first biome, we're going to create our persistent storage package, if you want to call it, or database. So similar to before, create awesome technologies, persistent vegetation package, and you can call this my persistent storage. Enter, and now we have essentially that created. Let's go back up to Vegetation Studio Pro. And what I like to do is, honestly, I like to move this all the way to the top because this is something we're going to use quite a bit. So I like to do is move up, and now it's all the way at the top here, and it's a lot easier to access. It's a small thing here, and now that my persistent and my planting by rules, they're the two most common areas that are used, are at the top here. It just makes things a little bit easier and cleaner. So we have our persistent storage, and it says we need to add a persistent storage to the components. If I come here to settings, you can see I see it's storage, it says none. Well, if I hit this create storage, it's going to do the same thing I just did, but it's going to put it in a different directory. So that's why I did it here, because I like to know where this is put, or where I place the storage. So I'm going to highlight it, and I'm just going to drag it in over here. Do you want to initialize the storage? Yes, I do. And I do that, and now my persistent storage is ready to go. Just be aware, if you initialize that again, it will delete everything. So be careful you do not initialize your storage again. Now you can see in here, if I go to stored vegetation, I got no vegetation. We haven't planted anything with persistent storage, right? We haven't baked anything, but again, we see that I have my first biome in here. So I can actually plant vegetation using this biome that we already created. However, let's remember my best practices, which is you should create your own biome for persistent storage planting, okay? We're going to do that in the next video. This was just really kind of getting started. So we have that package created. It's assigned here, and we're really ready to start going with persistent storage. So see you in the next video.